Good evening, everyone. You're listening to Red Pill 78. I am the corruption detector, and this is your Red Pill News for Saturday Night Livestream. Please remember that RPN is not responsible for the views, actions, or opinions of its guests or advertisers. An appearance on this platform is not to be considered an endorsement, and information contained herein is not to be construed as medical or legal advice. And the viewers of this channel are encouraged to do their own research. How is everyone doing tonight? We have a very interesting guest that's going to be joining us. Tim Canova. He's the man who took on Debbie Wasserman Schultz and would have completely unseated her had it not been for the evil Brenda Snipes. We're going to talk to Tim all about that. We're going to talk about the plan. We're going to talk about the future. You guys name it, and we will be able to discuss it. Tim is currently a lawyer and a legal professor. He is running an organization that is devoted to maintaining voter integrity here in the United States. So we're going to talk about voter ID. We're going to talk about paper ballots. We're going to talk about electronic voting, which is not a good thing. So guys, if you could, everybody please do sit back, relax, grab your popcorn, and we'll be right back after a brief word from our sponsor. What a time to be alive, guys. This is truly an unprecedented moment in our nation's history. The preppers are saying, "We told you so," and the financial advisors are scrambling to justify their advice to you and your retirement funds. But in the end, none of it means much, does it? This isn't the time for the blame game. This is the time to help each other out. And before this crisis happened, Noble Gold had been helping investors to educate themselves and discover new ways of avoiding financial disaster. And that is still the case. And right now, they're offering to talk to you for free about what choices might still be on the table to rescue your retirement plans. They have helped hundreds of people secure their stock-backed IRAs with gold and silver to stop them from falling so hard. It's time to get your hands into the physical world of precious metals before it's too late. You can have a chat with our team at Noble Gold, and you can call them at 877-646-5347. Once again, that's 877-646-5347, or you can hit the link below and get the free Investor's Guide. Tell them Red Pill 78 sent you, and remember, when you support my sponsors, you support this channel. All right, good evening, Patriots. Please, everyone, do bear with me. I'm having a bit of laryngitis. I'm hoping that I haven't gotten the CCP virus, but I'm sure in the end, everything will be okay. The dogs got into a fight yesterday. I had to raise my voice in order to get them torn apart. Just want to say hello to everybody in the chat. Honey, I love you. Glad to know that you are here along with all of my mods. Mother, I saw you out there as well. Glad you're here. This is going to be a great show. See Patriots from all across the globe, the United States, Europe, and plenty of places in between. So please guys, with no further ado, join me in welcoming to the show for the very first time, Tim Canova. Tim, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing very well, Red. Thank you so much for having me on.
No problem, man. It is my pleasure to have you here. So I first learned about you, as I stated in the introduction, when you were running against Debbie Wasserman Schultz, DQWS, the Queen of Florida. So let's go back before that, and I want to know how you got there and how you ended up where you are here.
Sure. As you mentioned, I'm a law professor. I had practiced law for a few years in New York City and then went into teaching full time. And I should say, even before that, I had worked on Capitol Hill for a couple of years as a legislative aide to the late U.S. Senator Paul Tsongas. He was a Democrat from Massachusetts. So over the years, I've been politically active at times. Never thought I'd run for an office, but would take up other people's causes. In my scholarship as a law professor, I was writing about international trade, financial regulation, the Federal Reserve. I wrote an awful lot about central banking. And in fact, in 2011, I got active in the Occupy Wall Street movement. I was teaching in Southern California at the time at Chapman University. And I got active in the Occupy Los Angeles encampment. And right around the same time, coincidentally, I got a call from a senator's office asking if I would serve on an advisory committee on reforming the Federal Reserve. That senator was Bernie Sanders, and I did. I served on that advisory committee on reforming the Fed. And that was my first real contact with Sanders himself. I was somewhat aware of his politics beforehand. Then I ended up moving to Southern California in 2012 to take a teaching job at Nova Southeastern University. And I got active a few years later, I guess it was 2015, in the movement against the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the TPP. Mm-hmm. And I had been writing about these trade issues for a while. I was very critical of the TPP, especially the way it surrendered American sovereignty to these offshore arbitration panels. I tried to contact my local congresswoman's office. I'm a tenured law professor at the only law school in her district, and I just assumed, and some of that assumption, I had been first tenured at University of New Mexico, and there's only one law school in the state, and we had a tradition of advising state legislators and members of Congress and senators. So I reached out to Wasserman Schultz's office, never expected to speak to Wasserman Schultz, but I thought for sure I'd have a decent discussion with a legislative aide and try to share my concerns about the TPP. Mm-hmm. But the long and short of it is I got brushed off, was told to email them. I emailed a few times and never heard back. And I found myself getting involved with a group called the Citizens Trade Campaign, protesting outside of one of Wasserman Schultz's district offices. Well, Wasserman Schultz never met with the TP, with the Citizens Trade Campaign, brushed us off time and again. And she was the only Democratic member of Florida's House delegation to vote to fast track the TPP. And at that point, the folks in the Citizens Trade Campaign thought somebody's got to primary her. Mm-hmm. It's a very safe Democratic district, overwhelmingly gerrymandered for Democrats. And we started to look for a local politician who would primary her, but she was the chair of the Democratic National Committee, so we had no takers. And at this point, I had spoken in public on the issue, and the folks in the Citizens Trade Campaign, some of them started to urge me to run against her. And I thought, I can't run for Congress. I'm not a wealthy guy. I'm not about to take any corporate money, any special interest money. But they kept kind of speaking in my ear. A number of labor friends in particular were trying to get me to think about it. And the turning point was late in 2015 when Wasserman Schultz used the DNC to lock the Sanders campaign out of the VAN voter database. Mm-hmm. And the Sanders campaign sued, and the day that they sued, they raised $1 million online in small donations. Mm-hmm. At that point, I realized, if I were already a candidate against her, I would have raised probably $100,000 or $200,000 today.
Right.
So I thought, I was, I must say, inspired by Sanders' campaign at that point. I had no contact with him since 2012, but, he was calling for a political revolution and for folks to step up and run for office. And so I did. And I jumped in. I thought this campaign could go viral. We could raise a lot of money online in small donations. And that's exactly what happened. Within a few weeks, we were raising tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars. I think we raised $1 million in the first 3 months. And out of the blue, in the middle of May 2016, I got a phone call telling me that Bernie Sanders had just endorsed the campaign.
Wow.
And really came completely out of the blue. I had a number of folks who had said to me, you got to contact Sanders. You got to get in touch with his campaign. I said, there's no way he's going to endorse somebody running against the head of the DNC. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the few surprises in the campaign. And we raised $250,000 that day. And again, all online and small donations. During the course of the campaign in 2016, we raised $3.8 million from 209,000 individual donations online with an average donation of $17. And at the time, I think it broke all records for small donations online in a federal campaign.
How did overall your fundraising compare to Debbie Wasserman Schultz and her campaign? I would imagine the majority of her donations are coming from special interests, from big groups.
Yes, actually, absolutely. And in fact, in 2015, when she voted to fast track the TPP, our research showed she had raised $330,000 from big corporate interests that wanted the TPP. Mm-hmm. And then we researched even a little further, and that was a big eye-opener, that in the course of her career, she'd been in Congress for about a dozen years, I think, she had raised millions of dollars from the largest Wall Street banks and big corporate interests that you could imagine. In 2016, she outraised me by about 2 to 1, I think, when you add in all of her PACs and super PACs. Mm-hmm. And even though we were outraised 2 to 1, I really felt like we were running a winning campaign. We opened up 4 field offices in our 1 district. And just by way of comparison, the Sanders campaign for president in 2016 had 1 field office in all of South Florida. I opened up 4 field offices in 1 district. Wow. We had, I think, about 50 or 60 people working full-time, mostly field organizers. And when you added the field organizers, the deputy field organizers, and volunteers, we had about 150 to 200 people knocking on doors every day in the Florida heat. The primary was late August 2016. And, when folks when we would knock on doors, we would input it into what was called the minivan, mm-hmm. which was an app on your smartphone. And so when you walk up to the door to knock on the door, you already know who lives there, what their ages are, what their party affiliation, and when they voted, not who they voted for, but when they voted in the past. And then after the engagement, that voter would be ranked on a 1 to 5 scale, whether they were leaning to Wasserman Schultz, strongly for her, neutral, or leaning or strong for me. And I should say by the end of the campaign, we were knocking on 12,000 doors a week and engaging with 3,000 phone calls a week. So a much larger sample size than a poll where they selectively call 600 people who are all over 30 or 45 years old and, where they try to get a certain result.
Sure.
And our final field numbers showed us winning a landslide, quite frankly.
I remember watching, and I thought it was a shoo-in for you at that time.
Yes, it looked like a landslide. Yeah. And the day before the election, the local NBC affiliate had up on their website a preview of tomorrow's elections, and for sheriff, for commissioners, for Congress. All of those races were zeroed out because no votes had been counted yet, mm-hmm. except our race. For some reason, had Wasserman Schultz ahead of me by about a 14 percentage point spread with 69% of the precincts reporting. We're like, what is going on here? We called up NBC. They had no explanation. They took it down. And the next day, that was about the spread. She beat me by about a 13 percentage point spread. And, I frankly didn't believe it, and I never called to concede. And instead, I put in a public records request to inspect the ballots. Mm-hmm. Under Florida statutory law and under the state constitution, all citizens have the right to inspect public records, and ballots were clearly considered to be public records under case law and the statute. Well, we put in the records request to Brenda Snipes, the supervisor of elections. We want to inspect both the paper ballots and the digital scanned images, because those ballots are passed through an electronic scanning machine to tabulate the votes. Snipes told me over the phone that they didn't do any digital scanned images. And I thought, how is that? If you scan them for the votes, why wouldn't you take a digital image? You only have to, press one toggle switch and it's done for the entire county. Mm-hmm. She said for some reason they didn't do it. So I said, okay, we'll try to inspect the ballots in about a dozen out of over 200 precincts. We figured we'd pick a dozen of the key precincts. Well, Snipes stonewalled us for something like 6 or 7 months. I finally filed a lawsuit to inspect the ballots. 3 months into the lawsuit, 3 days after serving discovery requests, Brenda Snipes signed a ballot destruction order, and they destroyed every ballot that was cast in Broward County in my election.
Wow.
those are violations of state and federal criminal law. Those are felonies punishable by up to 5 years in prison for each offense. And the funny thing was, they then said they had digital scanned images after all.
Oh, miraculously.
Miraculously. So, you know, there was no trusting whatever scanned images they had. We had one expert try to look at the scanned images in a few precincts. They didn't match up very well anyway. So that's the story of the 2016 election. And, you know, I had written to, I think, every member of Congress and the Senate, including Bernie Sanders and others, asking for a congressional investigation, and there was none. I was decided to run in a rematch in 2018 and initially thought I would run as a Democrat again. It is a Democratic district.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's about 45% Democrat, 35% independent, and less than 25% Republican. And I really thought when she destroyed the ballots that there would be a turning point.
Mm-hmm.
The judge in our case, this is Florida's 17th Judicial District, issued a summary judgment for us. So I won our public records lawsuit. And the only relief that he could give us was the payment of our attorney's fees. So that was over $150,000 from what I recall from my attorneys, but I got nothing. They couldn't hand me ballots that had been destroyed. So the 10-page order, though, listed the statutes that had been violated, these criminal statutes. And I thought when that order came out, there'd be prosecutions, that the prosecutors would announce investigations right away. And to my chagrin, none of that happened whatsoever. We later found out that at the federal level, well, we engaged with the acting U.S. attorney, Ben Greenberg, at the time, and he seemed very excited about prosecuting. After all, it's a prosecutor's dream.
Yeah.
We had Brenda Snipes in a videotaped sworn deposition admitting to the destruction. You know, we had the destruction order signed by her.
And what was her reasoning for?
She claimed it was a mistake.
Just a simple clerical error.
Yeah, a clerical error, exactly. And, you know, I thought, well, prosecute her, and then let's see if she's still, maybe she's willing to start spilling the beans for a plea bargain, right? Well, Greenberg, the acting U.S. attorney, went up to Washington for a week of meetings at the Justice Department and came back and suddenly had no interest in prosecuting. And we later found out his meetings were with Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, the great protector of Democrats, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, establishment Democrats.
So, I'm sorry, one moment, I just need to do a couple of quick thank yous. Kathy Chisholm, Tim Combs, and Clay Brown, thank you all for joining as members. Chris Hawkins says, no Hong Kong Fluey for Zachary Cronkite, which is me. Moderate Place says, I hope you and others like you know that you're the modern-day online USO for the troops. You're providing a vital service beyond measure. God bless you all. That is an incredible thing to say. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Rook Castle says, someone in the chat said, what's better than a Trump rally? Red Pill Live. Godspeed. That's awesome, too. Claire Pasaric says, can't believe raggy head Debbie Wasserman Schultz is still walking around. I'm very surprised myself. Mr. Dragon says, praying for Gerard's mom, shoulder broken. Okay, please pray for Gerard's mom. And Lady Cobra says, please use this to help buy the equipment you need for your backup videos. Thank you very much. And thank you to Son of a Green Card, who also gave a large donation like last night. Between those two, I will be able to buy a backup array. So I appreciate you guys. So he comes back after meeting with Rod Rosenstein. And what kind of relief could you get after that? I mean, I know that President Trump eventually oversaw her dismissal once Ron DeSantis came in, or was it before Ron DeSantis came in?
Well, it was before. You know, we were locked in this rematch. I did write to every Democratic Party official in Florida. I wanted them on notice. I wanted to see which ones would step up and recognize that this was just wrong and there should be an investigation. And it really was an eye-opener that not a single Democratic Party official, state or federal, would break ranks. Mm-hmm. You know, it's a very authoritarian political system we have. You follow the leader. You don't go against them. And there was no investigation at the state level. or the local level. The Broward Republicans fell silent.
Mm-hmm.
I was told they had the same financial backers as Wasserman Schultz.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided to run as an independent. And I am an independent still. I'm glad to have left the Democratic Party because of all of this corruption. We were hoping that there'd be a criminal investigation and would help us, but we were also hoping that there'd be a number of investigations into Wasserman Schultz. There was the Imran Awan scandal, where her IT person was apparently violating all kinds of cyber crimes, right?
Right.
And,
more than likely a Pakistani ISI agent.
Exactly. A great book by Luke Rosiak called Obstruction of Justice.
It's on my nightstand. I love that book.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I guess Paul Ryan was the Speaker of the House and helped bury any kind of internal investigation, while Rod Rosenstein at Justice helped bury any kind of federal criminal investigation. At the same time, we started getting blacklisted. I went from irregular appearances on MSNBC and CNN and Fox as well. And then it was like I touched the third rail. We win the ballot destruction case and suddenly nobody wants to talk to us.
Mm-hmm.
And we start getting shadow banned on social media. So it became a lot tougher to raise money, but we still had great name recognition in the district, ran a very good campaign in 2018. About a week or two before the election, a Republican news outlet published a report of a Republican poll that had us in a dead heat with Wasserman Schultz at 34% each, with the Republican back in the low teens and about 1 of 5 voters undecided. And we knew it was close. We thought we had a chance to beat her, but we weren't sure. It was really tough to gauge the 2018 election. But on the ground at all the early voting sites and election day sites, it was really beginning to look like the momentum was shifting our way. The polls close, and within an hour, they declare Wasserman Schultz the victor with something like 59% of the vote. Like, suddenly she's the most popular Democrat in the state of Florida. And I have 5% of the vote, which I didn't believe at all. And it turns out they didn't just cap us at 5%. We were capped at 5% for every demographic group.
How is that even possible?
Black, white, Hispanic, male, female, Democrat, Republican, Independent, the same exact percentage of the vote. Precinct size didn't vary. And the top experts in this nation in computational science at the top universities looked at it and said it's mathematically impossible.
Yeah.
It would be like winning the lottery every day for a year. Mm-hmm. The only explanation is rigging of the software of the electronic scanning machines that you pass the ballots through. Mm-hmm. So I'm also told that this could happen in almost any state. 98% of the voting machines in our country, the electronic machines, can be easily hacked from the outside, mm-hmm. or insider manipulation of the software. And in fact, every year there's a DEF CON hacking conference in Las Vegas. And I think 3 years ago, an 11-year-old boy hacked into Florida's election system within 15 minutes.
Wow.
And 2 years ago, or maybe it was 1 year ago, the experts assembled 100 electronic voting machines in use in this country, and every single one was hacked in at that conference. It's a national embarrassment and a disgrace.
It is, absolutely. And this is something that President Trump just mentioned the other day at one of the CV19 press conferences. They were asking if the American public should get used to the idea of voting electronically, or voting remotely. And he said that unless it's a paper ballot, you can't really be sure. He said that they can harvest votes, they can just make up votes. So this right now is a really timely issue, because with everything that's happening with the lockdown in places like Virginia, Governor Northam just put the lockdown in effect until the day after the Republican primary was supposed to be held. So obviously it's not going to happen on schedule. I really feel as if the Democrats in this nation are trying to use this situation to bring about electronic or remote voting for the entire country. So have you had a chance to speak to the president or speak to anybody on his team regarding this issue? Because I have to imagine he knows who you are.
He may know who I am. There were a number of times where I tweeted critical things about the DNC and Wasserman Schultz, and within an hour, real Donald Trump had tweeted something very similar. Mm-hmm. So I've been told that folks in the White House were very aware of my campaign. I have not spoken to the president, and of course, I'd welcome speaking to the president about this issue. In 2018, he held a press conference in which he endorsed paper ballots, and he's tweeted on it a number of times since. So what I've done, I don't think there's much chance of legislation coming through Congress, the House and the Senate working together on a paper ballot bill. Mm-hmm. I think there's zero chance of it. Anyone in Congress who introduces that legislation is just grandstanding, I believe. But I also think that the time is ripe for an executive order by President Trump. I'm a constitutional law professor and international law professor. And it's clear to me that the president has both inherent authority and statutory authority to issue an executive order on paper ballots. He's declared a national emergency, and there's about 135 statutes that delegate authority to the president when there's a national emergency. Mm-hmm. In addition, in January 2017, the nation's election infrastructure was declared to be critical infrastructure subject to the jurisdiction of the Department of Homeland Security. Trump has the authority to issue an executive order. We just started a petition at the White House website. If we can get 100,000 signers on this petition requesting the president to issue this executive order, then the White House will have to respond within 60 days.
I am actually going to be dropping the link to that petition below, you guys. Just over 1,500 people have signed it. It's through the official White House petition site. Yes, the dogs are okay. My daughter is coming and going downstairs. She knows I'm on the air, but what are you going to do when you live with people and you're trying to do live TV? But yeah, so you guys consider signing this because this is a very important issue, obviously. I mean, paper ballots, a voter ID. So considering the national emergency that we have right now, we've kind of talked in many different ways about the types of things President Trump could do as a result of that. This seems like one of those things that would be very, very smart for him to do, to put the voter ID law in, because I think you're right. I think that the houses of Congress are not likely to work together on this. And even if the Democrats do put something together, then it's not going to be something that the Republicans want to vote on, and vice versa.
And the president has to be concerned that electronic rigging could be used against him, mm-hmm. against any candidate in 2018. He should have every incentive to take this step. I think most petitions are really BS. Mm-hmm. Most petitions are done just so whoever's sending the petition out can add to their list of supporters and, for fundraising purposes. I don't think this is a futile petition, because if we get 100,000 signatures, and we only launched it recently, it gets the president's attention. Mm-hmm. And he has every incentive, and he has spoken out about this before.
I've already shared it on Twitter after I signed it myself earlier, and I was considering just dropping it in President Trump's tweets so that it would get some visibility, and maybe the president would see it. I feel like the situation we're in right now with this national emergency, with everything that's happening, it's such a perfect opportunity for things like this to be addressed. Is there anything really that the president can't do in a time like this with the emergency powers that are afforded him?
He has such broad authority, and yeah, there are limits to that authority. But like I said, there's so many statutes that have been passed to delegate authority as well during the time of a national emergency. What do we know about the CV-19? Mm-hmm. There's lots of speculation. Did it come from bats? Even the Washington Post is walking that one back now.
I saw that yesterday. Very interesting.
So there's a lot of folks. There's certainly credible experts who believe that this may have been a bioweapon that was either intentionally or accidentally released. And if it was a bioweapon released by the Chinese regime, again, whether intentionally or accidentally, you got to wonder, what would be the motivation? Is it to bring down the president? President certainly has been very tough in negotiating trade deals and slapping pretty significant tariffs on imports from China. Does that mean that the Chinese regime would have an incentive to try to hack into our elections? Now, it's just as likely that domestic intelligence agencies or large tech companies in the United States have the capability, or insiders have the capability, to mess with these elections. But just the fact that there could be a threat of a foreign intervention, whether it's the Russians, the North Koreans, the Chinese, the president has the kind of authority he needs to safeguard our elections from enemies, foreign or domestic.
I absolutely agree. How about the situation down in Broward now? Does it seem like Debbie Wasserman Schultz is, ever going to be unseated? Does she have a grip on power down there, or is it only because of the fact that they're controlling the voting? And who is the new supervisor of elections? Who took over for Brenda Snipes?
At the time, it was Governor Scott who fired Brenda Snipes. She was later allowed to retire and get a $130,000 a year pension.
Wow.
And Scott appointed Peter Antonacci, one of his lawyers, some would call him a fixer, as the temporary supervisor of election, the interim. And I met with Antonacci for an hour, and he apologized to me on behalf of, the supervisor's office. But as he apologized to me, sitting in the room next to him was one of Snipes' top advisors, who Antonacci kept on his staff as a top advisor.
Wow.
And the person who literally destroyed the ballots, carried out the ballot destruction order, remained on, in some capacity, on Antonacci's staff. So I don't think anything's changed. I don't think Wasserman Schultz could win a free and fair election. There's no way, in my estimation, she could. She's highly popular in a couple of Broward Democratic clubs. Beyond those Democratic clubs, she has trouble walking the streets in her own district. She gets heckled very quickly in public places. I don't think she could. She hides from debates. She hid from debates in both campaigns for May. She finally agreed in the first campaign initially to a 15-minute debate on TV. She's a disgrace. She has boasted on television about her ability, our ability, she said, to rig elections. But of course we wouldn't do it. Who even talks like that?
She is so problematic. There's so much going on there. Let me just do a couple of thank yous. TB Willen says DWS is a witch. She is part of the Wing. The Wing, is that group of that coven that Hillary is supposed to be associated with? Do you know?
I haven't heard that one. No, I haven't heard that one.
If anyone has some sauce to drop on that, I appreciate it. Joey Stewart says, God bless you, RP. God bless you, Joey, and thanks for being here. Trump 2020 landslide. Drink hibiscus tea, natural, antiviral, zinc, and vitamin C. I'm drinking throat coat. It was the best that I could do given the circumstances. Kanish says, rest your voice, son. I'm hoping to. Elizabeth Miller says, how can Trump get voter ID going like pronto? It would have to be an executive order. And if he was to do that, it would be implemented, and they would be able to get it in place. I have to believe that with the knowledge that President Trump has and the all of the various issues that he's been able to keep his eye on, that they know full and well the dangerous position that we're in right now with the lockdown that we're going through. So I would imagine they've got something already prepared in the background, and I do believe that an executive order is the only way we're going to get it done. Elizabeth Miller, thank you. The Felina 75 says prayers and strength and healing. Red Pill 78, thank you very much. And Mr. Dragon says, reminder, you must confirm your petition in the email. That is a great reminder. Thank you for that. When you do the petition, it's going to ask you to confirm. You have to go into your email. You get another email. Then it takes you back to the website. And you have to do that with every petition that you sign. Yes. It's a safeguard so that you only get to do it once. So One thing that I did want to talk about, you mentioned the Awan brothers scandal earlier. Is that situation still on people's minds down there? Because I mean, I know among us, the hardcore research community, it's one thing that we'll never forget.
It's really hard to say. I raised the issue a number of times. You'll recall that Wasserman Schultz had that famous or infamous confrontation with the chief of the Capitol Hill Police over the laptop. And I really did make it an issue. She has the local press in her pocket. The Miami Herald is part of McClatchy, the second largest newspaper chain in the country. The Sun Sentinel is part of the Tribune, the third largest newspaper chain in the country. And the way they reported on the Awan scandal was that it was right out of her own press release, which is that anyone who questioned the official narrative that Awan was completely innocent of almost anything was engaging in Islamophobia.
Right. Ridiculous.
It's pathetic. And, I'd say most constituents are not aware of that issue. They dislike her for many other reasons, I think. Mm-hmm. There was also a federal prosecutor that was murdered in 2017. I said murdered, excuse me. The initial report was the man was found on the beach in the morning in his suit with what appeared to be a couple of gunshot wounds to the head. Mm-hmm. And that the police had searched in every direction for several blocks and found no murder weapon. And the story gets forgotten, and a few weeks later, a small report in the local press is that he committed suicide.
Barrington Wiseman Jr., this is a case that I paid close attention to at the time, and I thought that it was very suspicious that it happened when it did, so close in proximity to Debbie's office in her district. And the fact, most shockingly, that he had 2 GSWs and they still claim that it was a suicide. And it's not that it happened quickly. They let it sit there and nobody talked about it for a long time, and then very quietly they announced that he must have committed suicide because I don't know, he's got a very quick finger. I don't understand how that's even possible.
Maybe he shot himself out at sea and then his body washed ashore. I mean,
yeah.
And they call somebody like me a conspiracy theorist. Mm-hmm. They've got to, tie themselves in pretzels to come out with their theories to explain a dead body.
Yeah.
And Weisenhut was apparently investigating immigration and visa fraud, as well as crimes related to Haiti. So, yes, that's what was reported. And at around the same time that happened, there was another very suspicious story that was reported in the Miami Herald, that the federal courthouse in Miami, there were attempts to penetrate it at several different entrances. Mm-hmm. And that a security guard noticed 2 men trying to penetrate through the garage in a car using federal IDs, but he recognized one of those folks and knew he was not a federal agent. So the 2 men were detained, mm-hmm. where one was detained and the other wasn't, which implies the other one was either actually some kind of a federal officer without permission to enter, or who knows. And that it didn't just happen at that one entrance, it happened at several entrances. And then the story disappears, no explanation. Why were people trying to illegally, serendipitously enter a federal courthouse? What were they after? Mm-hmm. No idea.
I have never heard that story.
And that was the Miami Herald. It reminds me of the movie Chinatown.
Yeah.
Very end of the movie. Let it go, Jake. It's Chinatown. Let it go. It's Broward County.
That's exactly the case. There was also, I believe, another suspicious death at that time of a gentleman who was also testifying in relation to activities in Haiti. That I believe he was down in Florida as well. I think he was he like dropped his barbell on his neck and
while lifting weights. That's right. I had forgotten about that one.
Yeah.
And if Weisenhut was murdered, that's the first federal prosecutor murdered in this country in, I think, almost a century.
it's shocking that they would not go after it with a little bit more urgency and try to see what's going on. Well, we said earlier that Brenda Snipes had done the bidding of the Democratic mafia down there in Broward. But ironically, this is not the first case that she's been involved with some voting irregularities. She was also deeply entrenched in the Hanging Chad scandal during the 2000 election, which ushered George W. Bush in. And I believe it was her call that ended up pushing the vote tally above so that George W. Bush could be president at that time. So my point is that the corruption knows no party allegiance. It crosses lines.
It does. And I wasn't aware of Snipes's involvement in that, but she's been sued by the Broward Republican Party, and they have won some of those lawsuits against her. So she was highly incompetent, or the appearance of highly incompetent, which folks would always point to say, well, she's not corrupt, she's just incompetent.
So why is she still working there?
And especially when the incompetence seems to serve a certain agenda. In fact, in that last campaign I ran against Wasserman Schultz, just a week or two before the election, we received photographs of Wasserman Schultz and Brenda Snipes campaigning together.
That's right.
Okay? The unbiased supervisor of election.
Just hanging out casually. No big deal.
Yeah.
And Debbie Wasserman Schultz's brother, isn't he also a U.S. attorney up there in D.C. or something?
Yes, Stephen Wasserman was a U.S. attorney in Washington, and I think he had jurisdiction within the Justice Department for the District of Columbia. So a lot of folks pointed to that, asking the question of what was happening with the investigation of the murder of a 27-year-old staffer. Am I allowed to say his name?
You can say Seth R.
Seth R.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the Awan scandal as well. Did she have her own brother protecting her within the Justice Department from any serious investigations? I understand he's not at the Justice Department anymore, and he's now in private practice.
Okay.
So it's quite possible that President Trump and the folks around him forced Wasserman out of the Justice Department.
I certainly hope that's the case. Now, getting back to the Awan brothers scandal, just recently, Judicial Watch has been seeking documents in this case, and they were told that they couldn't be given the documents because there is ongoing litigation. To me, I'm really hoping that means that there is ongoing criminal charges that are potentially against people like W. Wasserman Schultz, people in the Seth R. case, people in the Awan case, and that's one of those 150,000 plus sealed indictments that we have right now in this country. Now, as a lawyer, how unusual is it, in your experience, for there to be that many sealed indictments at any given point, and have them, be sealed for these several years that we've seen them and could just grow?
Well, I'll get to that in a moment. What you mentioned about Judicial Watch, in addition to that, a lawyer named Ty Clevenger has been seeking documents in the Seth R. case. The Justice Department and the FBI, I should say, denied looking into the Seth R. murder, but suddenly they have documents that they've been withholding from Ty Clevenger. So Clevenger's doing great work,
he is.
And so is Judicial Watch. It's now over 160,000 sealed indictments, so it keeps rising. And, as a law professor, I've asked some of my colleagues, they have no clue. I mean, lawyers, law professors, even prosecutors, I've even spoken to a couple of FBI agents who were not aware of this. This is, I think, the most important little-known fact today. Generally speaking, there's maybe a few thousand sealed indictments, federal sealed indictments. Why would a prosecutor seal an indictment? Well, you go to the grand jury, you present the evidence, and the grand jury votes to indict somebody. But the person, you want to make sure the details of the arrest, that you get the person's passport, that he or she's not fleeing the jurisdiction. You seal it until you can make sure you can grab that person.
Mm-hmm.
A few thousand. Now we're talking about 160,000. It's off the charts.
It is.
So it raises all kinds of questions. Who are the subjects of these sealed indictments? What are the range of crimes? Why sealed? This must be powerful elite people who are being indicted.
Absolutely.
And then how do you unseal indictments if there's that many powerful people subject to the indictments?
Exactly. Yeah. I'm going to continue with that thought in just a moment, but let me just say that TB Willen says the-wing.com. Okay, I'll check it out. Thomas C. Bryan says CV-19 is an FF to bring down the world economy and the Federal Reserve to bring in the NWO and monetary systems worldwide. Nasara, Gassara on the way, just saying. I certainly hope that is. I want to get your thoughts on the Federal Reserve and what we're seeing right now in a moment. Moderate Play says, love is like a resting place, a shelter from the storm. It exists to give you comfort. It is there to keep you warm. And in those times of trouble, when you are most alone, the memory of love will bring you home. I love that. Chris Hawkins says, what's wrong? That's how I would punch my own tickets if I was murdered. Tyler Hansen says, what is Tim Canova's views on our Second Amendment and our right to own AR-15s? Crystal Pelosi, thank you for that. And Cindy Castro, Awan sent terabytes of intel data to Pakistan. A lot of stuff with him. Take care of your voice, RP. Can't shelter at home every day without watching your show. All right, guys, thank you for all of those. I appreciate it. So, first of all, let's get your thoughts on the Second Amendment. I mean, where do you stand on the Second Amendment, Tim?
So I've been a gun owner, so I'm not anti-gun. The AR-15s and military assault rifles, I have supported a buyback as long as it's voluntary.
Mm-hmm.
I understand why citizens want to be armed. And I mean, what we're going through right now sort of answers the question in many ways.
It illustrates the reason why it's necessary.
It does.
Yeah.
I've got friends. I'm from New York originally. I've got an old buddy of mine in Manhattan, married with a couple of kids. He's telling me he wishes he had a firearm just for protective purposes right now.
Mm-hmm.
One doesn't know to what degree law and order can break down. So I'm very sympathetic to gun rights. I do think there needs to be a balance. I think there's a limit to the Second Amendment. It might sound like a truism. The key is to keep weapons out of the hands of certain people,
mm-hmm.
Right? Felons who have not rehabilitated, so to speak. People who are mentally unstable. You need a process to figure out who those folks are. Otherwise, it gets abused by the state.
Mm-hmm.
So I do believe in some kind of a balance. And so that's it in a nutshell.
All right. Yeah. The unfortunate thing is that criminals, felons who have not been rehabilitated, they will always be able to go and purchase weapons on the black market. So, when we get to that point, it seems like a much larger argument about just crime in society and the types of reasons that something like that is allowed to exist. I feel like the president is doing a lot to address that right now and make it more difficult for those people.
Let me just jump in and say one other thing, that some years ago when I was a young man, I traveled to Israel. I volunteered on a kibbutz. I was there for several months picking avocados, and then backpacked around Israel and Egypt and Southern Europe. I'm not sure I would travel around with a backpack alone in those areas anymore, but
probably not.
A lot of years ago. And on that kibbutz, almost everybody had a firearm, and the children were taught to use those firearms at early ages. And believe me, on a kibbutz, there's lots of interpersonal conflicts. Nobody was solving those interpersonal conflicts by drawing a weapon. That illustrated that it's really not the guns that are killing people, it's the people who are using guns. So I don't have a knee-jerk view on the issue. And I think it's the kind of issue where there's a lot of demagoguery going on right now. These school shootings are a travesty and they have to end. But there's no, easy solution sometimes to this.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to require a number of things. I do think some gun laws need to be tightened up. You could point to some of the folks who have been involved in these school shootings and you wonder how they ever got an AR-15. Okay,
Yeah.
so some laws do have to be tightened up, enforced better. Anyway,
what do you think about the overwhelming presence of psychotropic medication among the people who end up in these situations, the perpetrators of these situations?
yeah, I'm glad you brought it up. When there is one of these mass shootings, you always learn what the weapons are, what the assailant's relationship to his mother was or his girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
But what they will not publish, because they have to protect the assailant's privacy, is whether the assailant was on a psychotropic drug that has suicidal side effects. If it has suicidal side effects, it's got homicidal side effects.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
we are an over-medicated society. There's no doubt about that as well.
It's very interesting. The number of these things that we've seen over the last couple of years, specifically with President Trump coming into office. Overwhelmingly, I think he's presided over the greatest number of disasters, both natural and produced by man, since coming into office. Just need to say thank you to Lawrence. He says perhaps the step-down CEO's property is blocked. Denise says, tell Tim to be careful he doesn't fall into his mug. It's huge. Is it that big?
It's a big mug.
I feel like mine's, oh my gosh, it's much bigger than mine. Yeah. Then Banshee Bane says, what a naive fool. I don't know which one you're referring to, though. Dale Bercier says, from my red-pilled wife, Mary. She loves your channel. Where we go one, we go all. Much love, brother. Thank you, Dale and wife. And Legal Fiction says, do not ever give up your guns, from an angry Aussie. Makes a great point. I personally am not in favor of anybody giving up their guns. I think that the Second Amendment, to me, was created so that if we were to find ourselves in, stepping towards totalitarian rule, which is the direction that I thought we were going previously, then that's the exact reason why we need to have them. And also when we find ourselves in situations which could erupt as a result of what's going on right now. I don't think that anymore we need to worry about protecting ourselves from the government. I do believe that by having possession of these weapons, it's a deterrent to people that would otherwise come after us. You mentioned in Israel, everybody has guns, but nobody's pulling them on each other. There's a matter of mutual respect when people say, okay, I'm going to have to figure out how to talk to these people if I don't want to end up with, a couple of slugs in the chest.
That's true.
Yeah.
I will say, you just mentioned you don't believe guns are needed to protect yourself from the government. I would suggest the government is not a sort of uniform entity, right?
Yeah.
There are different levels of government. You might not be afraid of the federal government or certain agencies of the federal government. Other agencies, perhaps you should be.
Yes.
At the local level, Broward County is a Dem mafia down here. So
when I use that, I know it was very broad, but it was narrow in its scope. When we were under the previous administration, I saw that leadership from top down spreading through authoritarian rule and bringing us closer and closer to a police type of state, global governance and restrictions of our rights. Now, vaguely, when I look at the government, I see President Trump, I see his administration, I see the policies that he's been placing and trying to work towards moving us as a country. And so I see the step down effect from that. There's a difference when I look at, my local police officers. There's a difference when I look at, the people that are in Congress now. But, you're very right. There are many different factions to the government, and that's one of the reasons why it's been so difficult to weed out the swamp. President Trump's been able to get rid of a lot of nasty elements, but there's still a lot of work left to do. The administrative portion of the government is a huge, nearly endless bureaucracy, and there are many, many people in the way that are still there.
He just fired Michael Atkinson as the IG.
I was going to bring that up. That was great news. I couldn't have been more excited when I heard that last night. What do you think? What do you think that means? Because I have my own idea of why that would happen, but President Trump left him in place despite the knowledge that he had changed that form, besides the knowledge that he had helped facilitate the unnamed whistleblower. We cannot say his name on this platform. And only now he's been removed. What does that signify to you, Tim? What do you see when you look at that?
I guess Donald Trump and the folks around him are choosing the time and place to take certain actions. Mm-hmm. It was clear that Atkinson acted quite wrongly during that whole impeachment charade. I thought the president would have been justified to fire him right then and there. Mm-hmm. But he's remarkably shown more patience than a lot of us maybe would show.
Yeah, very, very true. I need to say thank you very much to Legal Fiction. Gino says, great show as always. Mr. Canova's attitude is surprisingly positive in spite of the obvious rigged elections. Is there any other investigations that are ongoing or being launched into these election crimes? Then Thomas C. Bryan says, Second Amendment shall not be infringed. Kathleen Glockner says, God bless everyone. I love Red Pill. Thanks. Thank you. John Austrius says, what part about shall not be infringed is unclear. As a law-abiding citizen and veteran, I refuse to be penalized for the horrific actions of a few and will oppose all legislation that does. I am one of millions. Yeah, John, I think that you echo the sentiment of a large portion of the country. Donna Greenberg is now joined as a member. So when I see Michael Atkinson's firing, after so much time going by where he was not removed, and he didn't immediately get fired once the impeachment hoax had fully run its course, I believe that they have enough evidence to indict Michael Atkinson. And once they do, there's going to be this, domino effect that takes place. And I think that Michael Atkinson will be one of many current maybe and definitely former administration members who end up seeing their day in court as a result of all of those sealed indictments. But what were you going to say in reference to that?
So somebody asked if there are other investigations going on. I certainly hope there are. I have no knowledge whether they are or not. The statute of limitations on prosecuting Brenda Snipes is a 4-year statute of limitations, which brings us to September of 2021. I am hopeful this Justice Department under Attorney General Barr will get around to that crime. It sounds like with 160,000 sealed indictments, maybe Brenda Snipes is one of those 160,000. If not, I know that's keeping Attorney General Barr quite busy. I hope at some point they get to these kinds of crimes because these should not be swept under the rug. I lost my train of thought. You had asked about some other crimes.
There was, I was talking about Michael Atkinson. A couple of people had mentioned the Second Amendment again.
I know what I wanted to say was that when you look at Atkinson, when you look at the Mueller investigation, when you look at this pattern of lying, of deceit and corruption, that so many Democrats don't want to even admit they're in an alternative universe. As a law professor and somebody concerned about the rule of law, and maybe it's not just that. Maybe it's the unique position I'm in, having observed closely Wasserman Schultz. Wasserman Schultz is in the middle of a lot of these crimes. The Hillary Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee, while directed by Wasserman Schultz, funneled $12 million to Fusion GPS to pay Christopher Steele for what the New York Times has admitted is apparently Kremlin disinformation to create a fake dossier on Trump. And then that whole list of bad actors, from James Comey, his FBI, to Loretta Lynch and her Justice Department, continually lied to a foreign intelligence surveillance court about the nature of that dossier. This is what needs to be prosecuted, among a lot of other corruption and crimes, I'm sure.
Virtually endless. Getting back to the nature of those 160,000 now indictments, this, to me, you asked why they would remain sealed. Well, if we're talking about some of the current and very recently most powerful people in this country, it would be necessary to keep them all sealed, and they would all need to be executed nearly at the same time, because as soon as one of them goes down, then the word is going to spread very quickly. And I suppose if their passports had already been revoked and if there was no way for them to get away, then...
Or there happens to be no international travel suddenly.
Exactly.
Because of the pandemic.
Yep, 100%. So now I have one more question, and then we're going to go ahead and take the first caller. Now, you're down there in South Florida. One big subject we love to talk about is Guantanamo Bay. There is a lot of activity taking place at Guantanamo. I'm sure you're aware President Trump has beefed it up to nearly epic proportions. I believe he's put $2 billion into it since coming into office. And very famously, he built a geriatric ward, which would be necessary if we were taking, some of our former politicians down there. But have you heard anything regarding Guantanamo Bay, like any servicemen or women talking about it, or anybody having any information at all?
No, I know pretty much what you have just said.
Okay.
That there is a new Trump hotel being built at Guantanamo.
Oh, that's gorgeous. I can't wait to see it. It's going to be amazing. All right, we're going to take, oh, wait a second. The caller just dropped off. Okay, not a problem, guys, not a problem. Need to say thank you to Donna Greenberg, thank you for joining as a member, and Patriot Lady Biker, what's up, my friend? They will have to pry all of my guns out of my cold, dead hands. That's right. Plenty of people
Plenty of people feel that way.
It's going to be the same. So, you guys, what I've done is I've dropped the Zoom link into the chat below. If you click that link and you have Zoom installed on your phone or on your computer, you can go ahead and ask Tim a question. I'm putting the meeting ID and the password now into the chat as well. And we do, Mr. Dragon, my friend Mr. Dragon is here. Let me see. Why does it keep, there he is. Mr. Dragon, how are you, my friend? Got to get your microphone working. But, the situation that we see ourselves in right now with this virus, with, the unprecedented moment that we are in history, and everything that we know about what's been taking place and what needs to be done, do you have any insight as to the nature of how evil it is down there in Broward? I mean, we had the Brenda Snipes removed. We had the sheriff removed. Does it seem like it's getting any better down there?
I'm not on the campaign trail. So, and then in addition, for the past couple of months, it's been sort of an increasing kind of lockdown or self-quarantine. So, it's hard to assess that. I wouldn't say that things have changed very appreciably. I think the Dem Mafia is still pretty much in control of Broward County. The last I looked, when I was running against Wasserman Schultz, I had spoken out asking questions about the murder of Seth R. Mm-hmm. And the day I announced, it was like they had the press mobilized to jump on me. And one of the local reporters said, "You don't really think that Debbie Wasserman Schultz was behind the murder?" So it was a sort of a setup question. And really all I had done was ask questions about the murder. Is there an investigation going on? And it's a little strange that nothing was taken. And, but by asking questions, I wasn't accusing anyone. Mm-hmm. But it made me stop and think. Anyone who is capable of stealing an election, who has so little regard for the laws and the democratic process that they would lie, steal, and cheat on an election, I'm not quite sure what they're not capable of.
Absolutely. No, I mean, it's a far cry. There's very little effort that would have to be put into orchestrating that event and taking care of him, sealing everything up, making sure that he stops talking when they're willing to do everything that they were willing to do to steal the election. I mean, we're talking about billions and billions of dollars in potential money coming through South Florida, hundreds of millions of dollars most likely coming into somebody like Debbie Wasserman Schultz's bank account.
And whether Wasserman Schultz is personally involved and has knowledge of these things or not is less important than the criminal network. I think there needs to be criminal RICO investigations of the Democratic Party at the national level and at the local scene here. South Florida is a hub, from what I read, of child sex trafficking. It's one of the major points in this country for child sex trafficking. This administration is finally beginning to do something about that.
Yes, first in history. This is, ironically, that very issue is how I red-pilled my mom and got her to become a Trump supporter. I showed her the data that President Trump and his administration were like the first president in my lifetime to do anything about this issue. And since coming into office, it's been exponential. You know, we're getting arrests all across the country, and just had $36 million additional advocated to the investigation and the care of these children once they're arrested. Let's go ahead and see Mr. Dragon right now. Mr. Dragon, go ahead and unmute, and we can get your question for Tim. How are you?
I'm good, brother. How are you?
I'm doing well, doing well. Thanks for joining us. What's your question for Tim?
Well, Tim, a lot of people worried about your stance on the Second Amendment, which it is your stance. But the red flag laws are getting a little sketchy. Most of us would like to see them gone. What would you do to help us out down here in Florida with that?
Well, I certainly wouldn't want a red flag law used against me unfairly. There's no doubt about that. But you take a look at the Parkland shooting, and this kid who shot up the place and took, I forgot, 17 or 18 lives. He should not have had a weapon. I mean, it's that simple. And, you know, perhaps gun owners have to figure out a way to police themselves. I don't know if that means to have access to AR-47s, AK-47s, excuse me, AR-15s, those kinds of weapons. You've got to actually be in a local militia. You know, it reminds me, when I was a kid, the Vietnam War was going on, and you had local draft boards, and the local draft boards would decide if somebody who was drafted was fit to go and serve and, you know, be shipped off to Vietnam. Do we need something like that now? Local draft boards, the local community deciding whether somebody is not fit to have one of these weapons? I certainly would not be in favor of taking weapons away from law-abiding citizens. But let me throw it back on you and ask you, I mean, should something have been done to prevent that young man who was so deeply troubled from having the kind of firepower he had?
How many times were the FBI contacted?
Exactly.
How many times was the local sheriff contacted?
That's my point. And that's when I say we need to tighten up enforcement of existing laws.
Existing laws, yes. The red flag's already taken the lives of innocent people.
I know I've heard of some case where the police knocked down somebody's door in the middle of the night, and he basically reached for his gun to defend himself. He didn't know who was knocking down his door, and he ended up dead.
Yep, and that's the worry for a lot of us, brother.
I mean, clearly we had a breakdown in the process because the FBI failed to do their job in that instance. I think that everybody can agree that there was some really strange things that took place with that case in particular. Tim, were you aware of the reports of somebody else on the scene? There was a witness there at Parkland who was with, I forgot his name, Nicholas was with Nicholas while there was activity taking place on the other side of the school. So a lot of people were wondering at the time, how was Nicholas there while people were being gunned down on the other side of the school?
I was not aware of that.
I will send you the interview. It was on local TV there in Florida, one of the first ones I saw.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to see that.
All right.
Some of these mass shootings, you wonder if the whole truth has come out. Las Vegas is a perfect example of one that just seems so sketchy. Was that fella set up? Did he really do all that damage himself?
Right. Yeah. That's one that I've always wanted to do a deep dive on. And, for example, taking a look at the autopsies, the angle of entry is far too steep, and there's a lot of damage to a lot of people that was too precise for it to be coming from that exact location. All right, Mr. Dragon, any follow-up for Tim on that?
Not so much. Just thanks for having the fortitude to come on here with us.
Thank you, Mr. Dragon. I appreciate
your views are different, but we respect it. And Red,
yes, buddy.
Take a peek at your emails, brother.
I will.
Tomahawk is sweet.
I can't wait to see it.
All right, you guys have a good one. I'm getting back on.
Yep, we'll see you
later.
Okay, awesome. He is making me a custom tomahawk right now by hand. It's really cool. I can't wait to see it. All right, we got blue collar news next. Why does it keep dropping off? Blue collar news. There he is. Zoom did an update because of all the issues they've had recently with people getting into meetings they're not supposed to. So there's a bit of a delay. Blue collar news, how are you, my friend?
Hello.
Yep, should be working. What's up, brother?
Oh, we had a little bit of a conversation last night about hard drives.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Today I purchased you 2 4 terabyte 7200 RPM hard drives. They're not solid state, but if you use them for backup storage, they'll work perfectly for what you need.
Dude, that's awesome. I'll buy the caddy for everything tonight. Oh, you did? Oh man.
So
thank you so much.
It'll be here on Wednesday.
Okay.
So you should have, and I think I've got another like 6 single terabyte 7200 RPM for you. You know, I know it's not solid state, but if you're just using it as backup.
Yeah, it'll be sitting still, so I won't have to worry about it.
Yep. So I'm going to turn my camera just a little bit. You see that little, well, it's not little, it's about 6 foot tall. It's a server case.
Oh, okay. I thought it was a closet.
No, it's actually a massive server case.
Nice.
If the group would like to host through my satellite pipeline, I have all the space that you guys need to be able to set up individual hard drives.
Okay.
Just for redundancy with a static IP.
Okay, that's awesome. That's a great way to do it.
But either way, I'm going to send you a care package, and we're not going to talk about how much it was. But
man, I'm so thankful and grateful for you. I really appreciate that.
You need to archive. You really do need to archive. There's been about 15 channels in the last week that YouTube just blocked them for 2 hours, but they deleted absolutely everything that was there.
Yeah, so that would be it would be very, very tragic if I was to lose the content on my channel. I sure hope that doesn't happen. So we'll get it settled. I do appreciate you for that, man.
Not a problem. So I'll reach out to you away from this.
Okay.
You guys have an absolutely wonderful evening in your conversation. I'm still working. Did you hear that President Trump declared Nevada a national disaster today?
I did not. Tim, have you heard that?
I have not. Is that from earthquakes?
No, 1.2 million people filed for unemployment a week and a half ago.
Yeah.
In the state of Nevada. And it's that's the hospitality industry. It's about 25% of the nation's workforce is hospitality.
Yeah.
Nevada had 1.2 million people.
Do you know how many people are in Nevada in whole?
Well, Las Vegas has 2 million total.
Okay.
And probably right around 850 to 900,000 live within the county that I live in.
Wow.
So when they shut down the casinos, the state of Nevada actually shut off all video gaming statewide. They just shut down their computers. So all of the convenience stores, all of the little mom and pop bars, all of the gaming went away completely. And 2 days later, you could only order takeout. And if you are a gaming facility, unless you have a full restaurant, you have to close your doors.
Wow.
You're not even allowed to make food unless you have a full restaurant, like a true full menu, sit down eating. There's people putting picnic tables outside on the curb so that people can still go to their usual places to see their usual people. And the picnic table's taking up half the parking lot. It's really, really interesting how everybody's dealing with it here. But no, President Trump just labeled Nevada a natural disaster. because
Well,
of how many people were unemployed in the blink of an eye.
Easy.
now, how many states now do we have declared as disaster areas? I believe Michigan, Nevada, was New York State also declared a disaster area?
New York City, it was.
New York City.
I believe Washington State, they were talking about doing it because that's where it was hard hit up in the Seattle area, but I don't know if they've done extra measures beyond what was already in place. I know California is.
Yep, California.
But this is all extra federal funding besides the stimulus packages that we've received. This is like truly up and above extra federal funding to be able to keep the people in the state where they're at.
Well, it's absolutely necessary at this point. I mean, unfortunately, it is what it is. And, we've had people on the show, talk about, the positives and the negatives of this stimulus package. But I would so much rather have the U.S. economy continue to keep going, and then we worry about, paying the money back at a later date. Let's just keep the economy moving. Let's keep people fed. Let's keep mortgages paid. I don't want to lose my car. I don't want to have my power turned off. We needed to keep going.
Yep.
Well, we absolutely do, and I think part of it is just we have to have hope.
Yes.
And being a constitutional American, I believe that there is hope. It doesn't matter what's thrown at you. We keep going.
Absolutely.
We adapt. We survive. We don't let it bring us down. I mean, I've watched some roller coasters living in Vegas over the years.
I bet.
it always hits Vegas before it hits everybody else because we're a discretionary income city.
Yep. Yeah.
People come in here are spending their year's savings, $2,000, $3,000. If fuel prices go up by 40 cents a gallon, that fuel saving, their savings is gone.
Absolutely.
They have to commute back and forth to work.
Well, Blue Collar News, I appreciate you calling in, buddy. Get a hold of me on email.
All right, bud.
All right, we'll talk to you soon. What I wanted to ask you previously, Tim, and I had forgotten. So we've got this unprecedented move the Treasury Department is taking right now, essentially nationalizing the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve's website is no longer a .org; it's now a .gov. All of the the debt that the Fed has taken on, and it's the Treasury Department that's owning everything. What do you see when you look at that? I mean, this has never happened before. The Federal Reserve has always not been an actual federal agency. Are we pushing out the European bankers that owned America as a result of owning the Fed?
I don't know. I think it's too early to know. I've studied a lot of Fed history, and in the 1930s and 40s, the Fed structure was pretty much the same as today, meaning it was a privately owned central banking system. And yet, functionally speaking, the Federal Reserve was an arm of Treasury for those years. Mm-hmm. It had what was called a pegged system. It was pledged to purchase government securities at any price in any amount required to keep the yield within the peg, and the peg was very low interest rates. But that was government debt that it was purchasing. It wasn't purchasing private debt. Mm-hmm. That door opened up in 2008, 2009, of course, with the financial collapse. Those asset purchase programs were known as quantitative easing, mm-hmm. QE. Now I've heard it referred to as quantitative eternity, Q eternity, right? There's no end in sight. I've heard a lot of theories about what this is all about. For many years, I was of the mind, and I wrote about it in all kinds of scholarly book chapters and law journals, that the Federal Reserve should really be an arm of Treasury, that it's anti-democratic, anti-sovereign for the Federal Reserve to be controlled by private bankers, mm-hmm. and that it should, in essence, be nationalized, that it shouldn't be a privately owned enterprise, and that it should be subject to political checks and balances. And it looks like maybe that's the direction we're heading in. It hasn't been formally nationalized. It's mm-hmm. still privately owned. It's just that it's like that sort of World War II peg I'm talking about, except it's not just government debt. It's all kinds of debt that the Fed is essentially purchasing. It's doing it through special purpose entities that the Treasury has set up. Mm-hmm. I need to study it some more, but you know, it might be heading towards an effective nationalization, and I think it's overdue. You know what presidential portrait Donald Trump has in the Oval Office?
No.
He has one presidential portrait.
JFK. No.
Andrew Jackson.
Andrew Jackson. Okay.
Who put an end to the Federal Reserve of his era. It was
Yes.
called the Second Bank of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, we've had the Third Bank of the United States, the Federal Reserve. And I don't think we've ever had a president who has been this openly critical of the Federal Reserve. There's evidence that Kennedy was trying to change the structure of the Fed. And we'll never really know for sure what his intentions were, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I teach a seminar on law, finance, and markets. And let me just show you, among the books that are assigned this semester, as long as we're talking about it, Battling Wall Street.
Excellent.
Kennedy administration, okay? Sort of the hidden view of Kennedy, where he didn't call it Make America Great or America First, but that's essentially what he was pursuing. Mm-hmm. Trade relations that were not, it was not the globalization model. Mm-hmm. It was, the American system, national sovereignty.
Excellent.
Here's another book that is assigned.
Licensed to Lie?
By Sidney Powell.
Oh, beautiful.
The lawyer for General Flynn.
Yes, yes.
About corruption at the Justice Department.
Yeah.
And then
that one's not showing up. The Myth of Capitalism.
And it's a myth because of the rise of monopolies.
Yep.
And here's a book on antitrust, the rise of the big tech monopolies. Okay, so it's not really a free market capitalism we have anymore. Mm-hmm. It's a cartel, crony capitalism. It looks a lot like socialism.
Yes, very true.
But socialism just for a few giant entities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. I think my friend Ardoc is here in the audience, and he mentioned Rule 13.3b. Ardoc, if you're here and you'd like to call in and we can all speak about that, I would really help, and I would appreciate it. It would help me just because of my voice. Need to say thank you to Brian Beller, says Florida is crooked as hell. They are. John Austria says over 100 million feel that way, not just a few. That's very correct. Tire Queen says take 5 days off, brother. I can't take that many days off, unfortunately. KC Anon says 18 USC 922 G1. Anyone who has been convicted in any court of a crime punishable by imprisonment for a term exceeding 1 year is barred from possessing a gun. Chris Hawkins says illegal guns are easier to get than any process. That's very true. Michael Cole, welcome as a member. KC Anon, red flag laws are unconstitutional. Anything that's based on someone's perception of a person outside of a court of law is hearsay and circumstantial. And I'll go on record and say that I think that red flag laws are an excuse to take the guns away from certain people. It's being used in a completely improper manner. Michael Cole says, what's the password for calling in? Michael, I think I will put it back into the chat, and there it is. Brian Beller says, C before D, children before Durham. That way, will we understand why the indictments were sealed and how they were protected? Then the public will understand just how sick these people are. Ronnie says, live in Nevada. What's even worse is live in Nevada. What's even worse is 3 weeks on and no unemployment received by my husband yet. Still shows pending. Ronnie, I'm so sorry to hear that. Hopefully you're going to get some relief here very soon with the stimulus money. And Michael Kenny says, are you going to Jekyll Island? I don't know if that's even going to happen, guys. The Red Pill Expo is supposed to be this year at Jekyll Island, obviously, of the Federal Reserve fame and the G. Edward Griffin book. But I don't know if it's taking place. As long as it happens and as long as my state isn't on lockdown, I still plan on going. But it's kind of up in the air right now. Okay, so we're going to take the next caller. Let me see who is here. Ardoc is on the phone. Perfect timing. Let's get Ardoc's thoughts on Rule 13.3b and the nationalization of the Fed. What's up, Ardoc?
Hey, guys. Sorry about that. I was in the waiting room.
No problem. No problem.
Just finished trying to get ready for going live when you finish up here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I did a quick little video on it and tried to educate some folks on it. 13.3b is what they're using for the Fed actually holding the paper for all these prime and prime issuers and then secondary market issuers. Right now, it's investment grade only. So a lot of the retailers like the Gap and everybody are freaking out, and they're trying to lobby to have them included. But this is something that has gone on the books as law and off the books as law a couple different, or at least one different time. It's interesting because now, instead of the Treasury issuing its debt to pay for corporations and other things, like we did in 08 and 09 for the TARP bailouts and other things where businesses were too big to fail, the Fed is issuing the debt and holding the debt. And that looks like they may be packaging that up and securitizing it and issuing that in secondary notes. We're still looking at the details of that one, but maybe I don't know if your guest is able to comment on that. Because that goes back to the history of the 30s and 40s that he was talking about.
Exactly. And Section 13.3b, the Fed used that authority to make loans. And during the Depression, it actually made loans directly to to Main Street businesses. It was authorized to make up to $280 million of direct loans to small businesses. It made those loans through the 12 regional Federal Reserve banks. And it's Section 14 that deals with the asset purchases, such as not just purchasing treasuries, but during the financial crisis, it was purchasing mortgage-backed securities in, trillions of dollars of mortgage-backed securities. So I think the Fed, as a practical matter, has the authority to do just about anything. And I add as a practical matter, because if the Fed exceeds its authority, it's hard to find anyone who has standing to challenge the Federal Reserve in court for exceeding its authority. There have been a number of challenges to the Fed, to its constitutional structure, and saying it's a violation of the Appointments Clause and what's known as the private non-delegation doctrine. And I won't bore you with the details of either of those, but all of these lawsuits have been dismissed at the DC Court of Appeals, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the DC Circuit, sort of the gatekeeper to the Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. And all of those dismissals have been on narrow procedural grounds, saying that the plaintiff lacks standing. The plaintiff cannot show a direct harm from the Federal Reserve, or that the courts can redress any harm. There have been senators who have brought actions against the Fed challenging its constitutional structure, also dismissed at the DC Circuit, which invented a doctrine called equitable discretion, which basically says we're going to exercise our discretion to not rule on the merits. And then the Supreme Court has denied certiorari in all of these cases. So you can't find a private plaintiff who has standing to actually challenge the Fed's authority, which is a blank check for the Fed to do just about anything. The real checks on the Fed are political. They're through Congress and the administration.
What do you know about the situation? So I know a couple of years back, Treasury had them do an audit of the gold being held in the New York Fed, and they were doing the drilling, and I think it was like $60 million of excess or waste, whatever you want to call it, the drill waste, Spaldings or whatever they call them. But then there was also an issue where the Fed is a holder of foreign gold deposits for ADRs, for the automatic deposit drawing rights, whatever. Trump keeps mentioning 1917, and this was a key period of time when both the Soviets kicked off. We had things going on. We entered into World War I a couple of months later, and we had the Trading with the Enemies Act, which then got called up, I think, in 30s, 31, 30, 33. 33.
Roosevelt.
Yes.
Yep.
So, and all this has to do with the gold, and then tie that into what was going on with COMEX with gold deliveries. There's something going on in terms of a play for who's got the gold.
Yeah, it could be. I don't have any inside knowledge of any of that. I'm also anxious to find out what's the story behind the scenes, so to speak. It looks like, a regime that's been in place, a central banking regime for many decades, might be coming to an end. And the last time it really morphed was during Nixon, when Nixon took us off of gold.
Right.
So there's lots of speculation that we might be going back on gold, that this could be the end of the private central banking system. Like so many things going on right now, it's like I'm hungry for some answers. I wish the emergency broadcast system would come on and answer all these questions, and we can eat some popcorn and watch it all.
Yep.
All right. Well, I'm going to jump off, man. I got to get 30 minutes left, and we'll see you guys later.
RDoc, thank you so much. And everybody, make sure you go to RDoc's channel. The link is in the chat once this is all done. Thanks, buddy. I appreciate your call.
All right. Talk to you later.
Yep. See ya. Okay. So
can I make a shout out?
please.
Two friends of mine first told me about Red Pill 78. One is John Paul Rice, who I know you've had on the show.
Yep.
And the other is Veronica Wolski, who headed the Bernie Bridges, and it's no longer Bernie Sanders she's supporting at all, but she's up there on the bridges of Chicago every day with her banners. She's come to South Florida with her banners for campaigning for me. And she's a wonderful person and a big supporter of Red Pill 78.
Well, thank you so much, Veronica. I appreciate you spreading the word. I've shared your photos on Twitter many times. She does a really great job of drumming up the interest and getting people's eyes caught. And so I'm glad that she switched from a Bernie supporter to a Trump supporter. Ironically, there's a lot of people who switched from Bernie supporters to Trump supporters. I think that at the heart of it, they were both trying to do similar things when they were running initially. They were both fighting against corruption. They were both looking to, change the way that things were done in Washington. Obviously, Bernie was closer to a socialist, and President Trump, is, a moderate Republican. But when
they appear to be outsiders,
that was exactly it. And so I think that for many people who switched from Bernie supporters to Trump supporters, that moment when Bernie bent the knee and clearly showed that he wasn't going to fight, he was going to allow them to steal the election from him, and now it's clearly happening again. I'm wondering how many more people that were Sanders supporters here in 2020 are now going to go back and vote for President Trump. Do you have anyone that you know that's flipping sides?
Yeah, there's some I know. I think there are a lot who are still up in the air. And when you look at the Dem exit, the Sanders supporters who left after 2016, not all went to Trump.
Mm-hmm.
Some went to Jill Stein, some went Libertarian, some decided not to vote at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's still the same thing. I think there are things that President Trump can still do to get many former Sanders supporters on board. He signed the First Step Act. That's one of the few criminal justice reforms in the direction of less incarceration in our lifetimes. He seems to be anti-interventionist as far as Syria goes and regime change wars. It's hard, had Hillary Clinton come in, would have been far different there.
Mm-hmm.
The TPP, I think moving forward, a lot of folks are watching how Trump handles the present crisis. How he handles those 160,000 sealed indictments is going to be key. I think election integrity is going to be key as well. I think should he make the right decisions moving forward, he's going to get an awful lot of folks like me coming on board and being very supportive of him. But I've also said justice for Julian Assange.
Mm-hmm.
That's very important to people like me. Should he treat Assange properly, the way I think he should be treated? I think it's a travesty what Julian Assange has been going through.
I tend to agree there. And I just want to be clear, I think maybe people got it mixed up in the chat. I'm not saying that Bernie and Trump were the same type of candidate. I know fully what Bernie's politics were and what Donald Trump's politics are. But I'm just saying, at the heart of it, they were both outsiders. And, President Trump won, and he's changed the system. And unfortunately, for Bernie Sanders and his supporters, he went another way.
Red, I just got to say,
yeah.
Having gone through what I've gone through and believing that the paper ballots that are being passed through these scanning machines are not being recorded properly, that it's being rigged, I don't know if I can bring myself to vote in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be complicit in this corrupt system. it is faith-based voting. I'm supposed to have faith in these private, shadowy firms that run the machines.
Mm-hmm.
If Donald Trump were to move us to paper ballots, there'd be millions of people who will vote who otherwise may not vote at all. In 2016, 97 million Americans who could have voted didn't vote. Either they didn't register, or if they registered, they just didn't vote.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot more than the 60 plus million that voted for Trump and the 60 plus million that voted for Hillary Clinton. And if he wants to bring more people in, you got to move to a more transparent, verifiable system. You need these paper ballots. I don't think it's an important issue. I think it's the most important issue in our politics today. Fighting the corruption and having a voting system that people can really trust.
I would definitely agree with you there. Need to say thank you to Steve J, hashtag HTD for life. Thank you for joining as a member. Banshee Bane says this toaster is such controlled opposite. This toaster is such a controlled opposition shill. He says he's from Florida with pine trees and the northern lights.
Well, you had something to do with that too, didn't you?
I chose the background because it's in Zoom. Zoom offers you a difference of backgrounds that you can do.
Otherwise, you'd see a dungy attic where I work.
That's right. Lauren Stoll says, a trust Treaty of Versailles. Look up Jose Rizal. Okay. Mr. Dragon says, if Tim would like to find a better way for red flag laws here in Florida, please give him my email, and we the people can find a safe way to do this with accountability on both sides. Thanks, bro.
Yeah, I would like that. You know, this issue, the gun issue, has become so polarized. And, you know, you're either in one camp or another camp, and nothing gets done as a result.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, please give me his email address after the show, and I'd love to continue this conversation.
Excellent. I'll be happy to. Chris Hawkins says, we are living the truth shall set you free, and it's just getting started. Very correct. And Steve Holcomb, thank you for that. Casey Anon says 15% of Bernie supporters will vote Trump according to a poll I saw. Paper ballots that require an ID, and you got a deal. I really think that President Trump is fully aware of how critical this issue is and what needs to be done. Let's go ahead and go to the next caller. We're going to go with... look at this. It's Dean Ryan. Dean, welcome to the program. Dean is, if it's the same Dean Ryan I'm thinking it is, it's a fellow YouTuber and somebody we've been exchanging some emails. Dean, are you there, my friend? Waiting for the microphone to get turned on. Let's see. Casey Anon, thank you very much for that super chat. I appreciate that. Dean, how are you, friend?
Doing good. I thought I'd call in and I guess is my
your camera is on, but it's very dark, so nobody can see what's happening.
Oh, that's good, because I certainly know that's for the occasion.
Yeah, no problem.
No, I had a question for the guest, and by the way, thanks for the emails. I've got a lot of information for you about everything going on here in LA, up to the point that all of California is currently using drones made by the Chinese, by the DJI company, who've made majority of the drones in the United States for all police departments, and very disturbing.
Yeah, who knows what's going on there in those electronics? They've essentially infiltrated the entire country, and if they don't know something that's going on, I'd be very surprised about it.
Right, exactly. So that's a frightening thing. Anyways, I wanted to ask your guest, I did have the opportunity to go to Broward County with the Kurt Haskell, one of the whistleblowers from the underwear bomber incident years ago. And we did investigate the Parkland shooting. And there was so many anomalies with it. For example, Cruz was, working with government experiments, and he was the recipient of like $1 million. His parents don't exist. He lived in a huge house by himself. He was 19. He was walking with one of the students during the time of the shooting, when the shooting actually happened. It just seems to me like this was so full of holes and one of the most corrupt counties in the country. If you were to get elected or had some kind of influence, would you call for a new investigation, considering all the anomalies and red flags? And for example, Peter Wang is buried in the Chinese student that was shot with the Chinese family, he's buried in a Jewish cemetery with only Jewish kids and elderly people. I mean, that seems a little weird to me, doesn't it?
You know, I've got to plead ignorance, genuine ignorance on this. There's so many things that have gotten my attention, and really, I've been to Parkland right after the shooting. I in touch with one of the folks who lost his daughter. In fact, here's a book.
Dean, just one sec. Dean, are you on speakerphone? I'm getting some feedback.
I'll put mute.
Okay.
You know, Andrew Pollitt's Why Meadow Died. His daughter Meadow was killed at Parkland. I don't know if you could see this.
He's the father who's an ardent Trump supporter, isn't he?
I think he is an ardent Trump supporter.
Yes.
And you know, I've met his son and his wife, and you know, I've met a number of the families of the victims, and I must say I haven't looked into the circumstances of the shooting. Maybe I should, but I haven't.
Dean?
Right, Meadow. We actually. You guys can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yep, go ahead.
Yes, sorry about that.
You're good.
A lot of issues out here in LA with the audio. Meadow, we actually had some research on her. Her father is heavily invested in all these high school security companies and security technology, and I think his company wound up getting a lot of contracts with many different schools around the nation. So there's a few things that you should look into with that.
I would assume that would have happened after the shooting. I don't think that would have been related to the actual shooting itself.
Right. It just seems that county in particular is just it's just reeking with corruption and ballot harvesting, false flags. And what's the congresswoman's name? She looks like Dee Schneider from Twisted Sister.
Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
Yeah, Deborah. Thank you.
Yes.
So, anyways, I'm gonna let you guys finish. Thanks for having me on, and I look forward to talking further with you at Red Pill at a later time.
All right, Dean. I'll be in touch with you tomorrow, buddy. Thanks for your call.
Bye-bye. I can understand the frustration. I mean, there's not a lot of transparency around a lot of investigations. We've spoken about a whole bunch of them right here in South Florida, where we need more answers than we're getting.
Absolutely. All right. I need to say thank you to Steve J. He says all you have to do is say Steve J. You guys, I'm going to mute for a second because I got to talk. Oh, that's much better. Okay. Going on to the next caller. We've got caller. Go ahead and mute your stream in the background so we don't get the sound coming through. And I'm going to unmute you. Can we get your name for the audience?
Yep, Terrence from Detroit.
Terrence, how are you, buddy? You're on the air with Tim Canova. What's your question?
Hey, Red Pill and Tim. Hope you guys are doing good. So my question is, in these press briefings that Trump is doing all the time, you're noticing the reporters are never asking what kind of treatment the patients that are released are receiving. And do you believe that Trump is taking the hydroxychloroquine as a prophylactic currently?
I hadn't thought about that. I am aware of a couple of studies. There was a meta study that was just published of 6,200 doctors in 36 countries, and hydroxychloroquine was the leading drug in use among these 6,200 doctors in 36 countries. So there's some success that they are finding with this drug. I thought it was only being prescribed when certain symptoms arise. I didn't realize it could be used sort of as a preventive even before the symptoms. I don't know if that's true or not. You know, it is interesting to see the pushback by the mainstream media against the prospect of hydroxychloroquine. And it leads one to wonder if it's an agenda for vaccines and forced vaccinations, perhaps.
Absolutely. I can say somebody had told me that a friend of theirs who's a doctor in India, that they pass out hydroxychloroquine like chewing gum because there are so many viruses and different things that pop up. But it's the first line of defense, and it can be used as a prophylactic. So, I mean, that's a good thought, Terrence. I mean, if I was President Trump, considering the situation, I would want to be taking it myself. What do you think?
Well, I definitely think he is, just the way that he's touting it. One thing that opened my eyes to it was back in January. I was looking at it and I was really thinking that Africa was going to be the biggest hot spot for the spread of the infection, just because how invested the Chinese are in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
So I was really thinking that we're going to see that blow up, but then we see that there's virtually no infections over there, and it's because I think a lot of the population is taking this.
Terrence,
So,
Terrence, I just received a text from Donna Greenberg, actually telling me that Trump said today he might take it.
Terrence, any idea on the number of cases they have in India?
no, the only thing I saw come out of India early on was there's the research study out of New Delhi where it showed that there's like 4 strands of the HIV virus that was within this coronavirus. I don't know about that, but India I have not heard or seen much, but I'm not really researching that.
All right. Well, I'm going to check it out. All right. Well, thank you for your call, Terrence. I appreciate you calling in and representing the Motor City. We'll talk.
All right, thanks, guys. See you.
Yep. Talk to you soon. All right. Thank you to Gerald, Jean, and thank you to Big Bear. Any word on the kids? You guys, I have a contact in New York City who is investigating for me and looking to get any firsthand information possible to see if there are any children that have been rescued. Believe me, this is the most important story going on right now. A lot of people talking about it. I want to be able to report it to you accurately. And Kimberly Bogan says, RP, do you have any information on the children in Central Park? Tons of stuff on Instagram, but nothing confirmed. Team Bogan trying to stay safe. Please, you and Kevin do stay safe. Yeah, again, a lot of reports, but it's all secondhand information or a third or fourth. I haven't seen anything that I can show you conclusively to say I am 100% sure that it's happening. It's one of those things we can draw conclusions, I mean, everybody knows that I covered the story about the military training, to fight in underground, situations and caves and, bunkers and stuff like that. We talked about that last year. We've seen some people coming out getting care on the Comfort or the Mercy, and they're very dirty. I mean, I don't know if they're homeless people that are getting the care there. I don't know who it is that's getting the care. So we're going to keep investigating. Let's see. Have you gotten any reports, Tim, from your family or friends still back in New York with regards to the situation there and how it's going?
Fortunately, my loved ones in New York seem to be healthy and fine.
Good.
Everyone there is a little freaked out, of course.
Yeah.
I have a supporter in Northern Florida who contacted me some days ago to say that they have a daughter who's a nurse in New York City. They know she's been working like round the clock. They know she's alive. She's barely checked in, but they're anxious to get more information from her. They're worried about her safety and all that. And they can't understand why she's not in touch to give them more details.
Mm-hmm.
So that's led to some speculation, of course.
Sure.
But other than that, I have no other personal information.
All right. Next is Beardley calling, and we're going to get Beardley on the line as soon as that microphone gets turned on. Joey Stewart says, haven't seen the cat tonight. Is she okay? I'm beginning to wonder. She should be here at this point in the show. And then Truth Seeker says, Patriot, proud forever. I'm ready for D-Class. How about you? Yes, I am extremely ready for D-Class. Tim, this is an excellent time to tell the audience, your opinion on our favorite Anon, the 17th letter of the alphabet. Many people were asking if you're aware, and I'm assuming if you watch the show, or you must at least be aware.
I am aware, and I mentioned Veronica Wolski, who first made me aware. And my first experience was one of frustration. You might recall back in late 2017, when I think Q was somewhat of a recent phenomenon.
Yep.
Right around Christmas time, there was all the imagery of Washington crossing the Delaware, and Julian Assange was going to be rescued from London, and it didn't happen. And that was around the time where there was a lot of speculation about John F. Kennedy Jr. as well. So I was busy on other things after that. I was quite disappointed that Julian Assange was not rescued, and I didn't pay much attention to the Q movement for a while after that. It's clear that the QAnons have been more right than wrong, and more right than the mainstream media about an awful lot of stuff. So I'm watching and following and hoping and praying that things come out well. I'm also anxious for D-Class. That's independent of the Q movement. Very anxious for declassified documents. I've got an awful lot of folks, loved ones, who have not been red-pilled, and some of them suffer from complete hostility and hatred for the president. I think D-Class might open a lot of eyes.
I absolutely agree. Now, one good thing, a silver lining, is that the extradition of Julian Assange is happening right now. I do believe that the president is aware of the information that he holds. So I'm hoping that once he gets here through that process, that's going to open up the door for him to be able to testify, and everything is going to be revealed at that point. All right, we're going to go to Beardley now. What's up, Beardley?
Hey, what's up, man? I wasn't sure if you'd answer tonight.
Oh yeah.
I was really late. It was messing up for me. It kind of asked me for the password and all this crap.
Yeah, it's acting a little funky tonight.
Yeah, there was an update I had to install.
All right.
The Chinese are hacking it,
That's what I heard. That's what I heard.
So I actually did have a question. Earlier on, he's a lawyer, right?
Yes. Yep. Tim's a lawyer.
So earlier on, you were talking about the sealed indictments, and I've gotten into arguments with people who are probably shills, but who may not be shills, who say that it's a misinterpretation of the PACER data. Is there any accuracy to that statement?
Not that I'm aware of.
So there really are 160,000 some odd sealed indictments in the United States right now.
That's my understanding.
Wouldn't it be unusual to have even like 160,000 extra indictments a year?
I believe so, and for them to be sealed, maybe unsealed regular indictments. It's a big country, 160,000 indictments might not be off the charts if they're just your run-of-the-mill indictments, especially that's not all in 1 year. I mean, that's accumulated over the last 4 years, I believe. But
still quite a few indictments. I mean, we do put a lot of people in prison, though.
Yeah.
So. The other thing is, so when you talk to other lawyers, like and you tell them about this, what do they say? I mean, it's so weird that it's like, how do they react?
Dumbfounded. They've been unaware. They don't have an answer. I haven't heard the response that you got, that it's a misinterpretation of the PACER data. If you could direct anyone who's saying that to me to actually give some substantiation about that, I'd be interested in hearing that. But
no, it wasn't me. It was somebody. I don't know. It was a long time ago.
It
stuck with me.
It's something that I've heard as well, and it's from people who are not legal scholars. They don't understand. They're interpreting the actual sealed indictments in a way that's incorrect. I mean, those are 160,000 individual sealed cases that are still there, and I think that I had heard that perhaps one indictment could be for a specific charge, and then another indictment could also be for a different charge for the same person. But regardless, it's still a lot of cases that have not been opened up. and that are secret at this point. It means that grand juries have been impaneled and charges have been put into place. This is real, and if anybody doesn't want to believe it, then, they'll find out. They'll see very soon.
Yeah, it's interesting because, there weren't that many sealed indictments in Michigan, so I was able to kind of look at some of them because of, what is it, Indictment Anon, who keeps track of it all?
Oh, Resignation Anon.
Yeah, well, there's somebody who keeps track of all the indictments and keeps like a folder of them on the QMAP. If you actually look at the source, there's a Google document. Anyway, I was looking at the ones in Michigan. It seems like they're mostly in the Detroit area, and that's where I'm in Michigan. That's where all the COVID cases are.
Oh, yes.
There's none on the other side of the state, as far as I know. I mean, maybe a couple, but compared to Detroit, it's like they're supposedly flooded, and our governor is, taking it up with Trump every day, and she looks like she's, got that look in her eye that she's seen the Lizard King,
That's
great.
Because
they're lizard people, they say. She looks like she's seen the Lizard King. She's got if you see Whitmer next time, look at her eyes. She's got a crazy look.
I'll take a look at her. She's a little wide-eyed. I've seen her.
Yeah. It's kind of like AOC's got a similar look in her eye.
That's a good catch. It's very true.
Yeah, something with socialists, man. I don't know. All right, man. Well, take it easy. I just wanted to ask that about the sealed indictments.
All right. Great question. Thank you for calling, Beardley.
Yeah, take it easy, man.
All right, brother. Peace. All right. We're going to have time for maybe one, maybe two calls. I'm going to get this last one in. Let's see. Dale Bercier. Dale Bercier is coming up. Thank you very much to Mother Knuckles. Brittany Taylor says, you sound like Dr. Fauci. Mother Knuckles, Red Pill, you can see in your eyes you feel bad. Please take another day off if you need to. I might take another day off. We're going to see how I feel tomorrow. Truth Seeker says, so what do you think the real truth behind AJ is? I mean, with all due respect, he did wake a lot of us up many years ago. I'll give my opinion on AJ on another day. But Dale, what's going on, buddy? How are you? No audio yet. We got to get your microphone working. So, okay, I'll give my opinion on AJ. I think that Alex is looking at losing relevance within a large portion of the truth movement. I think that that can be scary for anyone. I think that he did do a lot of good to wake people up, but at a certain point, it wasn't about the truth, and it was about getting power. And I think that that's the problem. Anytime people want to, collect and maintain power, enrich themselves rather than working towards the mission, that's when people turn to the dark. Caitlin Johnson says, what is the password when calling in with Zoom? And it was on the, I'm sorry, it's been put into the chat, but we're not going to have time to have any more calls, Caitlin. So sorry about that.
That's a bummer. I'm a reader of Caitlin.
Oh, excellent. Wait, I think that's Caitlin Johnson, not John Stone.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. That would be funny if that was her. Dale, what's up, my friend?
Can you hear me now, buddy?
I can hear you now.
Oh, sorry. I had to figure this out, man.
It's no problem. Glad you're here. Glad you called in.
Some of the callers took some of my questions, so I guess I'll make some comments.
Okay.
I appreciate the content that you bring, you and Methods.
Thank you.
You and True and the whole gang.
Thank you.
I use you to red pill many.
Really?
Yeah, I do.
Appreciate it.
Subtly, I present the facts to people, and whatever fits the bill. You're pretty mild. You're pretty honest. You and like True Reporting, Thomas, and some others like more cerebral content. I'll send to like Ardoc or Space Shot and others. But I do appreciate it. Try to support y'all best I can. I'm a mail carrier, so I'm deemed a necessity. Right
essential.
Yeah, I'm essential. So I don't know. I just like I said, 3 of the questions I had queued up, I already got answered for your guest. So I don't have anything else to say, but like, just keep up the great work, man.
Well, thank you very much. I do appreciate it. All right, Dale. Have a great night, buddy.
Hey, thanks, buddy.
Yep, no problem. All right. Awesome. So, well, we are essentially at the end of the program. So, Tim, I'm going to give you the last word. What do you want people to take away from this conversation we've had tonight?
Well, you're the corruption detector, and you've detected a lot of corruption. Anyone can detect a lot of corruption right here in South Florida.
Yeah.
What we've gone through in these 2 elections, I think, is a microcosm of the problem this country is facing right now. We don't really have a democracy. You can't trust the election results. The kind of Congress we have, who knows if the people have really been voting these folks in. And if not, and I just know it from my own district here, then who are these members beholden to? We got to get our democracy back. The president has spoken out time and again for paper ballots. We got to make it easy for him. Let's sign that petition, get 100,000 signatures, get it right on his desk. He might do it anyway.
Right.
Or he might not. Who knows? But I'd like to be part of that, and I think we all need to be part of that. This is such an imperfect constitution. I mean, really, and yet it worked pretty well for a lot of decades. It's broken down in a way, when the vast majority of people aren't bothering to vote and you can't trust the election results. This is something that we've got to fix, so my final thoughts are just to urge folks to go. You've posted the links to the petition, sign the petition, share it. Let's try to get the 100,000 votes. We've talked about a lot of other stuff, and who knows how things are going to shake out in the next few days, the next few weeks. It seems to be beyond the control of any of us. Your show is a great show that it starts opening people's eyes, and we've got to keep doing that.
All right. I really appreciate that. This is a nonpartisan issue. Everybody can get behind paper ballots and a voter ID. So, guys, please do consider signing that petition. I want to say thank you very much, Tim, for joining us here on the program tonight. Appreciate you suffering through my laryngitis. Thank you to the audience, all of the mods. Thank you to everybody who sent the super chats tonight. Real quick, got a couple more. Steve says CDC website says to put CV on death certificate if assumed. There's a lot of people who are being reported as dying of CV who don't actually have it, or it's not verified anyway. Lynn Houston says New York respiratory doc says ventilators are not working on these virus patients since the virus doesn't react like a virus in the lungs. Very dangerous. Chat post suggested a cough machine used by ALS patients. Well, hopefully that's something that they're going to figure out. Just once again, guys, thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you, Tim, for being here. Good luck, everyone, and God bless. We will see you when I see you. Might be taking tomorrow off.